And welcome everybody to our magnetic fields and features segment. It's magnetic. It's Earth's magnetic moment from space, magnetohydrodynamic pressure here, modeled over the past 4 hours. And we've got pretty high pressure environment here around planet Earth. It is a geomagnetic storm condition. So we're seeing some aurorae across the globe. We'll show you the likely locations. The likely locations of that. For the moment, we're looking at the last 4 hours of magnetohydrodynamic pressure modeled by the Space Weather Modeling Framework. If you want to read about that, click on details on the Geospace Magnetosphere Movies page. This tab right down here, details. It'll provide a link to the Space Weather Modeling Framework so you can see where the model is derived from. Next, ground magnetic perturbations, changes to Earth's B field from the ground level. And it's geomagnetic storm conditions. We are expecting this to subside rather soon here. We don't see a strong negative BZ component in the solar wind. We'll get to that in a moment. And we do see a slow subsiding here of the changes to Earth's B field. We'll let this play through here to give you a full 4-hour run of this data set. Keep in mind this data is not accessible, and we've been covering it for the last few years. At least putting up 4 hours of data daily on the channel, covering space weather in detail. Nobody else is doing on the internet. So there you can see that indeed subsiding as we forecasted there at the end of the last 4 hours. GOES magnetometer showing some very spiky sawtooth readings here. Also the satellite needed to adjust itself. That was the GOES 16 maneuvering to maintain its near equatorial geosynchronous orbit. And these big spikes are caused by a bunch of plasma in between Sun and Earth. Next, looking at the plasma from a polaric perspective, the polarity of the heliospheric current sheet. And I would note that we did forecast the rushing forward of the South Pole current sheet. So this red area, that's a South Pole current sheet. The green area, that's a North Pole current sheet. And you can see this South Pole current sheet rushing toward Earth as we forecasted. So it's now just reaching stereo A at the moment. And we can expect to be in a South Pole current sheet, possibly by tomorrow, but certainly within 2 days. So that's what's going on with the local plasma polarity environment. Here's a line of sight view. It shows the solar magnetogram as well, and you can see some massive sunspots there in the northeast. They're fairly simple sunspots, but they have been producing some flares. We'll get to that in a minute. First, the coronal hole line of sight plot showing the sun's B field in blue. And we see some South Pole trans-equatorial coronal holes rotating in. You'll see at the end of the video some red appearing there, rising over the eastern limb. Those are South Pole-oriented coronal hole systems. As the migration of the solar polar fields continues through cycle 25. You can see those getting a little bit better defined here. Are those North Pole? Let's let this play through one more time here. Those are still North Pole coronal holes, folks. These ones right here, those are North Pole. In case you're wondering. And let's go to sunspots. So sunspot 2953 has grown over the past 24 hours. 2954 and 2955 are both alpha-class sunspots. They're not likely to produce major flares, but maybe they're interacting with each other there. There's quite a bit of filamentary activity going on to their north, and possibly even behind them to their east. So those are something to keep an eye on. And when I say eye on, well, pardon the pun. 2953 has become a beta gamma class sunspot, so the likelihood of flares has gone up a bit as a result of that. So here's 2954 and 2955. There was a C3 class flare, I believe it was. We'll get to it in a minute. Here's a full disk view. And you can see a little bit of growth happening here in 2953. Here's a close-up 171 plus 1700 angstroms. And again, there is a C-class flare mixed in there. That was a C3.19. Peak flux was at 1900 hours there yesterday. If you want to make yourself videos of that. We see an ongoing proton event here. It's pretty minor. it's taken its time to subside here. So this is an ongoing proton event. Just 1 week old. We're just pushing the 1 week anniversary there of that proton event associated with a flare and a coronal mass ejection. And let's go to the real-time solar wind. So the reason we're expecting to see the geomagnetic storm conditions subside is that the BZ has moved into positive territory. So now it's hinting at negative territory again. We'll just have to wait and see what happens next. We did see the solar wind make it all the way up to nearly 600 kilometers per second here, over 590 at that moment there. That was 1:02 a.m. this morning, 1:02 universal time. Current conditions are solar wind speed about 530 kilometers per second, still elevated, still a high-speed coronal hole wind stream. Solar wind density 8.2 protons per cubic centimeter. There's your KP index. Currently in geomagnetic storm conditions. So it's a KP5 at the moment. And if you've got auroral photos or anything like that, hit us up on Twitter. We'll feature you on the channel. Next, looking at the solar system, here's a 1 week forecast. Here's where things will be in a week. It's about 1 day from the new moon on March 1st. Looks like March 2nd, new moon, my favorite phase. Shout out to all our reverse werewolves. And here's a star chart. The yellow line is the ecliptic, the path the sun will take across the sky. The blue line is the galactic plane. And we've got a planetary pileup morning after morning where Mars and Venus side by side on the ecliptic. The moon is setting, and you've also got Mercury and Saturn rising ahead of the sun. A great time to view planets in the pre-dawn hours. Last but not least, coronal mass ejection watch from Stereo A and the LASCO C3. Stereo A on your left, LASCO C3 on your right. Located at Lagrange point 1, Stereo A at Lagrange point 5, and the coast is clear. No coronal mass ejection, just a minor coronal mass ejection on the opposite side of the sun here. And for your new viewers out there, the Earth would be off in this direction from Stereo A's perspective, and from the LASCO C3, Earth would be behind you as it is located at Lagrange point 1. Thanks for tuning in to our Fields and Features segment. We've got one more daily space weather video to premiere after this. Also, we do meteorology segments on the regs. Check those out at the Smash News Network. Least busted name in news. And may that solar wind be at your back.